Stan Gibilisco here, proprietor and operator of amateur radio station W1GV, Whiskey 1, Good Vibrations. Here to further describe, or if you haven't already seen the initial video, to describe in general the characteristics of a certain type of end-fed antenna. And what I'm describing here involves a device called the EFHW8010, end-fed half wave. That's what this stands for. 8010 stands through 80 through 10 meters. 1/2 wavelength wire at 80 meters or 3.5 megahertz, fed at the end. If you do that with a device called the EFHW8010, manufactured by, I forget the name of the company even now, but if you Google on EFHW8010, or if you want to read the product review, you can do that in the March 2016 issue of QST magazine, pages 52 to 53. I believe it's called My Radio or something like that. I forget the name of the company now. Darn it all. Old man, absent-minded. But I do remember the basic facts that I want to describe right now about an antenna like this. If you use it with this device or any other end-fed resonant antenna, which is any integral multiple of 1/2 wavelength, so it presents a very high, purely resistive impedance right here. A high impedance and purely resistive, probably on the order of 1,000 ohms, resonant, no reactance. That's the basic characteristics of an antenna like this. The first consideration is that you want to feed this thing, since you're feeding it at the end, you want to have a reasonable ground. You don't need to have an excellent RF ground, but you do need to have a reasonable RF ground. And that may comprise a simple ground rod with a little post hole digger and some salt, and no plants like trees too close to the ground rod, but you want the end to come right down near the ground. You want your coaxial cable from this box to run to your shack, as shown here. And in the ideal case, the coaxial cable should run in a straight line with the radiating antenna element, or as nearly a straight line as possible. Not a right angle to the antenna, as some people believe in the conventional ZEP configuration, but as nearly in line with the antenna as you can get it, or you can bury the coax in a conduit, in a metal conduit, to shield that coax completely from any RF fields that will radiate from this wire. You do not want common mode currents on that coaxial cable, current on the outside, RF current on the outside conductor of that cable. You can also place ferrite beads at intervals along the length of the cable to choke off those currents, to be sure you don't get RF in the shack, something you do not want. Those are just some design considerations for this antenna. I've outlined the merits of this particular box, the EFHW8010. The company is in Zephyr Hills, Florida, and I just wish I could remember the name of the bloody company, but I can remember the name of the magazine, the month in which it was published, and the page numbers in which this device receives a favorable product review from the experts at the ARRL lab. And if they say it's good, you can be pretty sure it is, because I used to work there. I used to work in that lab, and I used to do evaluations like this, and I can tell you that they subject those products to exhaustive testing. And if it passes their muster, it's a good thing. It's a good device. Trust me on that one, at least. So those are the considerations. You want a reasonable RF ground. You want the end of the antenna where the feed point is to be near or right at that ground point. You do not want this thing up high in the air. You don't want this fictional ZEP antenna design. You've seen that, where you have a half-wave wire like this, and then you have your feed line like that, and they call that a ZEP. That's not really a ZEP antenna. 90-degree angle here. It's not a true ZEP. A true ZEP would look like this. Any length of feed line, but generally 1/4 wavelength of feed line here, and a half a wavelength of radiating element here. 3/4 of a wave overall, all in a straight line. That is a true ZEP antenna, which they used to dangle from Zeppelins in the olden days, and now that they have Zeppelins again, they're probably starting to dangle them again. The only way to dangle an antenna from a Zeppelin, of course, was... Is there any room for me to draw the old ZEP? Well, there is if I erase this. Here's your old blimp. You know, the little fins here and the propeller, and here's your blimp. Looks like one of those religious symbols. Pardon, don't mean to offend anyone there. Here's your ZEP, just dangling from your Zeppelin. And, of course, it radiates along this half-wave portion. That is a true ZEP, and the ideal configuration for this antenna would be just like that. Just like that, except for this box, which enables the antenna to perform well on all integral multiples of the frequency at which 130 feet represents a half wavelength, or about 3.5 megahertz. I described that again in the other video about the EFHW8010 for some more detail. But just a couple of design notes. These are my opinions, but I think they're pretty well founded in theory. Especially seeing as that I've been a radio ham now for over half a century. And if I don't know what I'm talking about by now, I never will. Stan Jabalisco signing off, saying 73, and in my native fist, whatever the frequency, whatever the antenna design, whatever the propagation conditions, and whoever happens to be president of the United States, translating into my fist always turns out as da-da-da-da-da-da.